Hello there. Marc Daniel Nelson here with MakeMineMusic. I'm back, and I'm here to show you a cool new plugin that I designed with Pulsar Modular called the P455 Sidecar and the P450 EQ. Now, this was released about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and it's been doing really great on the rounds, on the threads, and the forums. And I want to just come on here and talk a little bit more about the options. Some people might not have heard of this yet, so I'm going to describe a little bit about the features so you can understand why I chose what I chose in this plugin. And if you have any other issues, I will put a link towards the original release video that goes a little more in depth. If you feel like you want to jump ahead to find out about the new features that we just added and the new updates, go to the pinpoint on YouTube. But for now, let's talk a little bit about the plugin. So, about 2 years ago, I was contacted by Caillat, who is the head guy and the owner of Pulsar Modular, and he wanted to discuss possibly doing an analog chain kind of mix bus plugin. I've always been a big fan of API in the sense of it's always been one of those universal sounding consoles that works so well with all different types of music. Sometimes specific equipment doesn't jive well with different types of genres. And a few years ago, I had the pleasure to get the Sausalito Record Plant's API, the first 8 buckets of that console. And that's what I've been using to do a lot of processing, EQ, multi-EQ, and summing. Through my chain, I also use my AT101 Fairchild, and most of the time, not even with compression. And then I use one of my other assortment of compressors for a little bit of bus compression. So I felt this would be really cool to be able to come up with a plugin that emulates in one stereo plugin the sound of what summing does. This plugin took a little over a year to design with Caillat. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that we would get very close and we just wouldn't be able to break through that wall of like being able to hear the difference. Another aspect of this plugin that I can talk to you about before I go over some of the features is the characteristics of conversion. I use 2 different types of A to Ds when I'm printing analog, and a lot of that has to do with the sound of that box. Now, a lot of people are thinking, wow, if you're using really high-end mastering A to Ds, shouldn't it be transparent? Yes. But like anything, they're going to have a sound. Some things are more spacious sounding. Some things have a little more focus and punch. And I have 2 boxes, which I won't name the names, but I'm sure there's a lot of chatter out on the forums that know what is what, and they can talk about it. But today I've just named them after Atticus and Willie. Let's jump into the features. Now, looking firsthand at the plugin, you see a couple of different features and a very easy, simple setup. You have the very standard API EQ in 4-band based off of the 5500, even though it has the characteristic of the original vintage EQs that I have in the Sidecar. Outside of that, you have the line amp on the AT101, and you have the different flavors of AD conversion. One is Atticus, one is Willie. Willie is a little more punchy and forward and kind of tight, and Atticus is a little more dreamy and 3D and open sounding. Now, going through this, there's a bias knob that's really special too, that kind of really pinpoints the sound of analog goodness. You have to really dig into it hard to kind of see and decide what is it doing. But then you also have the input knob. And like any feature you want to have auto gain, you just hit shift, and that allows you to keep your output level the same while driving into the actual sound of the box. Driving into my Sidecar, if I hit it a little harder than lighter, it's going to saturate differently because of the transformers and the op amp. And that is definitely part of the sound. So this allows you to just be able to have so many different features in one plugin to kind of start the mix. Now, I'm going to say something quickly about that. Usually, when you're putting together some sort of chain, you want to mix through it. There has been talk about this plugin sounding great on already mixed sources. Some people, and anyone that has a consistent idea of what they want in a mix, you put anything, any piece of gear in line, it's going to change the sonic characteristic. For good, for bad, it doesn't matter. It will always change it. So you have to decide if that's a good thing. I would absolutely recommend to mix through it versus kind of plopping it on there. But we have added features for people like mastering guys or people that are really happy with the way it sounds, but they just want to add a little more flavor, to end up taking some of those elements out to create it to be a little more transparent, a little more like the way they wanted it, while retaining the sound. If you go up to the mod feature, these are 2 additional features. Mod 1, Mod 2, these are different collections of a different type of sounding op amp and a different type of sounding tube. Now you can toggle between the 2 and decide which is working inside your mix, and it just gives you another feature to really jive into what you're doing. I know a lot of people out there have been using this for multi-bus operations too, which it does work really well. Some people pop in the 2-channel and put it on their stereo buses that are their channel buses of pianos, drums, bass, their groups basically, and then they put the 8 on the master. That works really well too. Now, this compressor wasn't necessarily modeled after any one unit. This is kind of a collection of sounds that we came up with a couple of my different favorite compression circuit sounds. So the SSL, the API 2500, the Fairchild Very Mu sound into one. They have very, very low ratios, and there's just basically 2 options. Very simple. And a sidechain, which I believe is at 80 hertz. So you can get all that low pump back into it. Now, there has been an update since the first initial release, and the reason why I'm putting out this video here to talk about it is to kind of get it out there to talk to you about these new features. Outside of everything else, and again, you can go down to the description and look at the release video about all the older features. These new features were put into play not as addition, but we pulled them from what we were building originally in the plugins that we decided not to keep. And we implemented again after reading all these. I think we're hitting around 140,000 views on Gearsluts, and the discussion has been really in-depth and creative. And there's been a lot of positives there. And in fact, we decided to implement some of these older features without changing the original design to kind of overview and cover basically all the people's preferences. At this point, if you can't get something out of it that you're wanting, then we're in big trouble, because we've implemented these 3 new features up here that shows a little different shift or an opinion or a view of how you're going to represent the sound. A lot of that has to do with imaging, some of that has to do with transient punch, and some of that has to do with jitter distortion. Let's talk about these. The first feature that we just added in this new 1.5 update is the stepped and smooth feature. Now, when building this, they found that creating the code originally and nailing the sound of the sidecar chain of all things in line, there was some sort of minor distortion or jitter in the process that felt a little odd until you heard it. And we wanted to give an option of smoothing that out. Now, the step version is in default. The smooth version is just a little cleaner sounding, and it has a little more transparent option. But the original release has the step, and my preference is the step. Moving to the left, this is the stage focus option. This feature allows for like mastering guys and people that want to put this on an additional mix, that they're happy with everything. They're already using widening or something in their chain. They already have saturation prior to it. They just want to add a tiny bit more character, a little more space between the instruments, because that's what this thing does the best, is create space between the instruments. And it's not necessarily just width. It's not necessarily a depth thing. It has to do with the way that fundamentally summing, in my opinion, works. When you combine stuff, it just adds a lot more space and ethereal openness to it, which makes me really excited. With the stage focus off, it pulls in the image a little tighter and it makes things a little stronger sounding in the center. It's not about pulling it out. It's not about the flaw of the box, again, because the original hardware in line does this thing where everything sits back in the center image. And there has been some chatter about that online where people just wish they could get that center back while retaining some of the character of what this plugin does. So that's essentially what the stage focus does. It allows you to get that back if you want it. And again, the hardware does exactly what it does when it's blue. It makes things sound set back. It makes things sound wide. And I like that. But we're going to give you the option to turn that off if you want. And the last feature in purple is the hammer. It's a two-step thing. It's not more aggressive as it clicks deeper. It's two different options. So half is one sound and the other full is just a different sound. And what this is a frequency-dependent exciter, essentially, that will add a little more punch and a little more hammer on what you're trying to get out of the mix. The fun thing is if you can turn off the stage focus and then add the punch, you're going to get even more tight center imaging and a little more punch out of that. Let's take a listen to a song and let's play with this a bit. This song is called Nashville. It was written by one of my good pals back in Chicagoland, Chad Burton, and it's one of my favorite songs I've mixed this year in 2024. I'm actually thinking about offering up the Multitracks because it was just such a fun song to mix. It's a great tune that reminds me of an old classic Jimmy Buffett song with a hint of 07. Just a little bit of combination there that really felt really tight and good. And the story that he's telling is really just kind of one of those things that worked really well with this plugin because it just makes it just kind of dreamy and ethereal. So we're going to play with that a little bit. But download the Multitracks because I'm going to just offer this song up so you can play with it too. Get the plugin and see what you can come up with it. Maybe you like a different setting. Obviously, this is where it gets fun, where everyone has their own opinion and it goes the way it goes. I'm going to start with it on flat, no EQ, even though I have an EQ from the song. I'm going to take it out. I'm going to leave it on Atticus AD, and I'm going to take out the compressor. I'm going to leave the bias here, but I will toggle it a bit, and I'll just kind of play around with the track a little bit. First, I will keep it off. I will toggle it on, and I will start playing around with what you'll hear.
Been on my mind since I was a little child.
All right, let's pop it in.
Yes,
just the sidecar.
No choice from the way it made me smile. And all I ever wanted is to live my dream. Where I come from, it gets hard just to make ends meet.
Let's hear what Willie sounds like on the AD.
I traveled up and down any road.
He's a little tighter, it's a little more focused.
Still, I just can't seem to find a home.
For this song, I feel Atticus is the right hit.
I got no time to waste. It's just me and my suitcase.
Turning it off, you can instantly hear things kind of starting to get constipated and tight. Let's take out this focus of the stage focus.
Now I reckon everybody wants to be a star.
Listen to the snare.
Live in a big old house and drive.
See how it pushes the snare back? It's not compression, it's the sound field in general, and that's how the actual hardware was operating like.
Gotten used to the simple things.
By taking it off, it allows me really quickly to be able to get it back. Now it does limit the stereo spread a little bit.
Traveled up and down any road.
But it's such a fine detail that you can make a decision if you like one or the other.
Still, I just can't seem to find a home.
Let's pop in the EQ.
but I just don't have any more time to wait.
I have my smiley face option here where I have a little bit of 50, took a little bit of 240 out, and I added 10K. And my filter is at 40 hertz.
Please don't ask me to stay. I got no time to waste. This is me and my suitcase.
This is one of those plugins that just makes it fun to mix through. Just kind of gives you a smile. I'll pull in the compressor.
It's just me and my suitcase.
Here's your gain reduction meter. It's very light.
I'm on my way. Oh.
Again, I can toggle with the shift on the output for auto gain.
Yeah, coming down that way. Oh, coming down that way.
Pushing into it, you can hear it kind of clamping a little too much. Something to think about real quickly before we start fooling again with the stairs and the stereo width and the hammer. Like hardware, when you're adding a chain, you're going to end up getting 5% better. I do take into this consideration that the rule is always, if you hit 100%, if you can add 5% better, already at 100%, then that, in my opinion, is double better, because it's impossible to get past that if you can't get past the 100%. I know it sounds weird, but a lot of it has to be really fine-tuning elements that will get you that 5%. And usually that 5% is impossible to get inside the computer without doing a ton of processing and a ton of fiddling. More focus on the focus center. Here's hammer 1.
Now I reckon everybody wants to be a star.
Hammer 2.
Live in a big old house and
you can hear it in the kick.
drive a real nice fancy car.
Off.
But in my life I've gotten used to
This option's similar to the bias, in my opinion. There is a sweet spot for it. The hammer doesn't work with everything. And in fact, we left it off in the initial release because of that. But we ended up putting it back, and I was doing an album that needed some kind of trailer drop stuff. And I was just missing that little bit extra octave low pump. And the second flavor really did it for me.
But I just don't have any more time to waste. So I grab my bag and I'm gonna be on my way. So please don't ask me to stay. I got no time to waste.
Alongside this sidecar comes with a 450 EQ. The 450 EQ is the EQ version of this sidecar EQ of the 550 and the 5500 mastering version of it. So it gives you, again, the option to really cut in half your increments of your gain. This also gives you the bias knob, a little bit different filters than the master. I have this set pretty aggressively. It's on a snare. We can listen to it with and without.
No choice from the way it made me smile.
The cool thing about API EQs is the sound of that fizziness. So on snare drums, they are absolutely terrific.
Where I come from, it gets hard just to make ends meet.
Now pushing it hard,
Traveled up and down.
it really still doesn't get harsh. That's 5K. In digital land, if you're boosting plus 12 at 5K, that should be just poking your ears. But like the hardware, You can slam it like Ken Caillat. He is a fan of just churning all these up, all the way. He loves the way the amplifiers sound on EQs of API. Adds a sound to it. That about wraps it up for today. If you want any more information, please go visit Pulsar Modular and look up the 455 Sidecar. You can demo it. In fact, I think we're going to open up the demo options again for all the people that ran out of their trials. So go demo it again for another 2 weeks. Have fun. And if you need a little more information on the plugin or understanding the features a little more in depth, please go watch that video again on the release video that we have in the description. Have a great day and happy mixing.